Every morning, millions of people wake up fasted and unknowingly flood their body with the one hormone that puts a biological padlock on visceral fat, and it's not coming from food. Most fasting advice completely ignores what happens in your first 90 minutes of being awake, which means people are doing everything right and still can't shift that stubborn belly pouch. There's a specific morning sequence that drops this hormone fast enough to actually force your body into visceral fat territory. But the order matters more than anything else, and getting it wrong actively works against you. Once you see how simple it is, you'll wonder why nobody in the fasting space is talking about it. Real quick, before we get into it, always check with your doctor before making significant changes to your fasting routine or diet, especially if you have any underlying health conditions. What I share here is educational and based on research and experience, not personalized medical advice. Now let's get into it. Here's something nobody tells you about fasting. The war for your visceral fat isn't won during your 16th hour. It's won or lost in your first 90 minutes after waking up. Think about that. You've been fasting all night, you wake up. Your insulin is low, your body is primed and ready to dig into those fat stores. This should be the golden hour, the moment your body finally goes after that stubborn belly fat wrapped around your organs. But for most guys, that window gets hijacked before they even brush their teeth. And the hijacker has a name: cortisol. Now, cortisol has a terrible reputation, and honestly, it's earned it. But I want you to understand what it actually is, because hating cortisol without understanding it is like blaming the firefighter for the fire. Every morning, your brain signals your adrenal glands to release a cortisol surge. It's called the cortisol awakening response, and it pulls you out of sleep, gets your blood sugar up, and prepares your body to handle the day. In small doses, for a short window, completely necessary. Without it, you'd be a zombie until noon. The problem is that in the modern world, that morning spike doesn't just do its job and go home. It gets amplified, extended, turned into a chronic state. And when cortisol stays elevated too long, it stops being a helpful alarm and starts being a fat-storing, muscle-eating disaster. Here's where things get personal. Visceral fat, the deep fat packed around your liver, kidneys, and intestines, is not your average fat. It behaves more like an organ, and it has an unusually high concentration of cortisol receptors compared to fat stored anywhere else on your body. Think of cortisol receptors like VIP parking spots. Most fat cells have a few. Visceral fat has a whole parking garage dedicated to them. So when cortisol floods your system in the morning and stays elevated, visceral fat basically rolls out the red carpet. Right this way, park here, stay as long as you like. Cortisol tells your body to hold on to that fat as emergency fuel for the stress it thinks you're under. Your body doesn't know you're not being chased by a bear, it just responds to the hormonal signal. Protect the reserves, break down muscle for quick energy, and keep that visceral fat locked up tight. So you wake up fasted, which is perfect, then cortisol shows up and slams the door on your fat-burning potential for the next several hours. You're fasting on paper, but your body is running a completely different program underneath. How does cortisol get out of control in the first place? That's where your morning routine either becomes your biggest asset or your worst enemy. The first thing that sends cortisol through the roof in the morning: your phone. I know, you've heard this before. But this isn't about productivity, this is biology. The moment you start scrolling emails, news, social media, your brain registers new information. New information equals potential threat. Potential threat equals cortisol. Your body literally cannot distinguish between a stressful work email and a physical threat at the hormonal level. It responds to both the same way: cortisol up, fat burning down. The second amplifier: caffeine before your cortisol has peaked and started dropping. This one's going to hurt. Your morning cortisol naturally peaks about 30 to 45 minutes after waking, then starts coming down. If you drink coffee the moment you wake up, you're adding caffeine on top of an already elevated cortisol spike, extending and deepening a state that's working against your fat burning. The cortisol is already handling the wake-up job. Adding caffeine right then is like sending reinforcements to a fight that's already won, except the reinforcements start causing collateral damage. I know that coffee the second your eyes open thing is basically a religion for most guys. I was there too. So I want to know, what time do you actually drink your first coffee during your fast? Because I'm willing to bet most of you are doing it way earlier than 45 minutes in. This might be the single easiest fix with the biggest payoff. The third amplifier is the sneakiest: lying in bed half awake after the alarm goes off. Staying horizontal in that half-stressed, half-conscious state, hitting snooze, running anxious thoughts about the day, keeps your body in cortisol no man's land. You never get the clear signal to finish the spike and move into recovery. You're stuck in hormonal limbo, and your visceral fat is fully protected the entire time. None of this feels dangerous. That's exactly why it's so destructive. It's completely normal. It's what almost everyone does. And it's silently sandbagging your fasting results every single morning. Look, I've broken down the complete fasting guide in the pinned comment below. It's all there. Grab it before your next fasting window. And if this is already changing how you see your mornings, hit subscribe, because the hormonal side of fasting is exactly where we're going next. But here's what I need you to hold on to. The same morning that's working against you right now can be completely flipped. And when you do it right, you're not just canceling the damage. You're actively engineering the conditions that force your body into visceral fat territory. Before I give you the sequence, one concept you need locked in: the cortisol curve. Your morning cortisol naturally rises, peaks, and drops. That drop is what you want, because as cortisol declines, norepinephrine rises to fill the gap. And norepinephrine is the hormone that actually unlocks visceral fat cells and gets them releasing stored energy for fuel. The goal isn't to suppress cortisol completely. That would leave you feeling terrible and barely functional. The goal is to help it peak quickly and come down fast. So you spend the majority of your fasting window in a low cortisol, high fat burning state instead of a prolonged cortisol state where visceral fat stays locked up. Think of it like a controlled sprint versus a slow crawl. You want cortisol to do its job fast and get out of the way. The morning sequence I'm about to show you is essentially a launch pad that accelerates exactly that process. The sequence starts before you've said a single word to anyone. The moment you wake up, before your phone, before coffee, before anything, get your feet on the floor and move toward natural light. Step outside if you can. If not, open the blinds and stand near a window for 2 to 3 minutes. Natural light hitting your retinas is one of the fastest signals your brain can receive to anchor the cortisol rhythm and start the peak and drop cycle. You're telling your circadian system, day is here, start the clock. Cortisol can do its job and hand off. Blackout curtains and phone screens don't send this signal. Natural light does. While that cortisol spike runs its natural course, move your body. Not a full workout, just movement. A 5 to 10 minute walk outside keeps the light exposure going, raises your body temperature, which helps cortisol peak faster, and signals to your nervous system that you're safe and functional. That's the biological all clear that tells cortisol it can start backing down. Then, and only then, after that initial 30 to 45 minute window, make your coffee. Black coffee is your ally in fasting. It suppresses appetite, supports fat oxidation, sharpens focus. But timed correctly, after your cortisol has already peaked and started declining, caffeine extends your fat burning state instead of extending your cortisol state. It's the same drink, 45 minutes later. Completely different biological outcome. After the coffee, bring in your longer fasted movement, your walk, your workout, whatever's in your routine. Your cortisol is now declining. Norepinephrine is rising. Insulin is still low from fasting. This is prime visceral fat territory. This is the window that people doing everything right are missing. Because they wake up, stress scroll for 30 minutes, slam coffee immediately, and then wonder why their results plateau. Here's the bigger pattern worth understanding. Cortisol responds to perceived threat, and it doesn't just mean physical danger. It means financial stress, relationship tension, work pressure, even that low-grade background anxiety that runs like an app you forgot to close. For a lot of guys, that's constant. And what it means for fasting is that even if you nail the morning routine perfectly, chronic life stress keeps cortisol elevated throughout the day at levels that compete directly with your fat-burning hormones. 3 things make a measurable difference here, and none of them require a supplement. Consistent sleep is the most powerful cortisol regulator you have. Not perfect sleep, just consistent sleep. Same bedtime, same wake time, even on weekends. Every time you stay up until 2 a.m. on Saturday and sleep until noon Sunday, you reset your cortisol rhythm the wrong direction and spend the first half of Monday fighting through an elevated spike before your fast even gets going. Adequate protein in your eating window acts as a cortisol buffer. When your body knows it's getting enough protein consistently, it's less likely to interpret fasting as a threat and trigger protective cortisol responses. Low protein plus fasting can push cortisol higher than either one alone. This is simple. Eat enough protein. And cold exposure, even a 30-second cold finish to your shower, creates a sharp, brief cortisol spike followed by a dramatic drop. Your body gets a controlled stress hit, peaks fast, comes down hard, and leaves you in a lower cortisol state than where you started. 30 seconds of uncomfortable, hours of payoff. Sound like something you can work with? Because everything I just described is free. It just requires intention. Let me tell you what shifts when you start managing morning cortisol consistently, because it goes beyond the scale. The first thing you'll notice is that fasting gets easier. Elevated cortisol drives cravings, specifically for high-calorie, high-carb foods. Your body is in stress mode and it wants quick fuel. As cortisol normalizes, those cravings quiet down. The white-knuckling disappears. Fasting starts feeling like a choice instead of a sentence. The second change is energy. A lot of guys interpret afternoon crashes during fasting as proof that fasting doesn't work for them. What's actually happening is that chronic cortisol is burning through available fuel inefficiently. When cortisol peaks and drops properly in the morning, your energy curve across the day levels out in a way that makes the entire fasting window feel different. And the third change, the one you came here for, is what happens to visceral fat. This is the slowest to show up visually, because visceral fat doesn't respond to one good morning. It responds to a pattern. The guys who see waist measurements dropping while everyone else on the same fasting protocol stays stuck aren't necessarily fasting longer. They're operating with lower cortisol during their fasting windows, which means their bodies are actually accessing those deep fat stores instead of protecting them. That's the lever. That's what moves the needle when everything else is already in place. I've put the full fasting protocol in the pinned comment. If you've been fasting consistently and your belly still isn't moving, this is the missing piece. And if you want to keep going deeper on what's actually happening hormonally while you fast, subscribe, because we're just getting started on this side of the conversation. Look, a lot of fasting content focuses on what you eat and when you eat. Those things matter, but they're the surface layer. Underneath, your hormonal environment determines what your body actually does with the conditions you create. You can fast perfectly, eat clean, train consistently, and if cortisol is chronically elevated, your visceral fat stays protected. It's not weak willpower. It's not bad genetics. It's just biology doing exactly what it was designed to do. The Kong approach isn't about doing more. It's about removing the invisible friction that's quietly working against everything you're already putting in. Your morning is not neutral. Every choice you make in those first 90 minutes is either accelerating your fat burning or breaking it. The phone, the coffee timing, the light, the movement, these aren't lifestyle suggestions. They're biological switches. And you're the one with your hand on the panel. Fasting gives you the conditions. Cortisol management gives you the results. Put both together, and you're no longer just hoping the scale moves. You're engineering the exact hormonal environment that makes visceral fat burning inevitable. Starting tomorrow morning, wake up, don't touch your phone, get some natural light, move your body for 5 to 10 minutes. Let the cortisol spike do its job and come down. Then make your coffee. Then get after your fasting window with intention. That's it. Done consistently, that sequence changes the biological outcome of every single fast you do. And if you've been fasting for months wondering why the belly isn't moving, this is probably the missing piece. Gorilla Mind. Know the game you're playing? Go focus on the carcass.